Book of the Dead becoming God in ancient Egypt. Production and use. How a Book of the Dead manuscript was produced. Master copies, local traditions, and compilations of individual Book of the Dead exemplars. The sheer mass of witnesses allows us to gain a solid idea about recurring and standard features in Book of the Dead manuscripts and to distinguish more unusual constituents. On this basis we may draw conclusions on the models which were used in the workshops for duplicating the Book of the Dead. Master copies were apparently not uniform geographically and chronologically, nor were they models to follow slavishly and absolutely. Though the Book of the Dead may appear as a stereotypical collection of funerary spells, it was nevertheless open for individual modifications, especially with regard to the length and choice of spells. There are barely two which are exactly the same. Occasionally, we also see new impulses in the content of the corpus, as in the Third Intermediate Period, when spells are modified and texts were incorporated that did not belong to the corpus before, or in the 26th dynasty, when the whole corpus was fundamentally reorganized. Likewise, the illuminations offered opportunities for individual and alternative forms of details. For example, the more common sledge on which the mummy is being transported to the tomb in the vignette of Spell, one is sometimes replaced by a funerary cart with wheels. Certain iconographical variations and peculiarities in the vignette seem to reflect local traditions. The vignette of a given spell in a Theban Book of the Dead may look slightly different from the illustration of the same spell in a Book of the Dead produced in Memphis or Akhmim. If features typical for location X can be found in documents also of Site Y, we may assume that a Book of the Dead template has been transferred from one workshop to another. Exchange of papyri and books between temple libraries even over large distances must have been a common practice in Pharaonic, Greco-Roman, and Coptic Egypt. From the late period onward, copyists would resort to a master copy whose spells followed the standardized and largely fixed sequence of the so-called Satic recension. Prior to the Sate recension, we encounter a looser arrangement of texts with certain preferred sequences of spells. Actual master copies have very rarely survived. One of the scarce specimens is being conserved in the British Museum. It is a late Ptolemaic Book of the Dead, which contains a demotic placeholder men, so and so instead of the owner's name. The most extensive Book of the Dead manuscripts comprise more than 150 spells, but often scribes chose only a selection from this extensive corpus. Accordingly, the length of Book of the Dead documents varies considerably. While some papyri with more than 100 spells are well over 20 meters long, others measure merely a meter with only a few spells and an introductory vignette. The longest examples measure about 40 meters in the second half of the 21st dynasty. Short versions come into use, so-called miniature Book of the Dead documents with a length of 50 centimeters to 2 meters, a reduced sheet height, an opening vignette, and just a few spells. One of the most exemplary specimens is the 89 centimeters long Book of the Dead papyrus of Izetamakbit, which bears only an opening vignette and the text of spell 136 pairs. The reason for the individual choice of certain spells remains unclear, but for sure it was not at random. Economic factors and personal preferences might have been important factors. A long roll inscribed with spells and decorated with polychrome vignettes must have been a costly funerary good. As we learn from a Ramesside Ostracan, a decorated Book of the Dead papyrus of unknown length was worth 1 deban of silver, hence its value equals a half-year's wage of a workman or the price of 3 donkeys.